Welcome to Real Talk in ELT, a podcast that talks about the reality of teaching English. Hey there, welcome back to another episode of Real Talk in ELT. I am here by myself today, and fuck it, I'm gonna do it anyways. So, this is my episode. Teaching swears. I had a class recently that it devolved into something that was beyond hilarious, to be honest. It was quite funny. Two professional guys talking about swearing because they both wanted to curse out their bosses. So I gave them some pretty colorful language, and of course, professional responsibility told them that I do not recommend using that colorful language in their workplace because it is unprofessional and will probably lead to them getting relieved of their working conditions. But needless to say, they thought it was a fun class, and we went through all sorts of way of cursing people out. Now, it's important to note, and I'm just gonna kind of read down some things for you. I've thought about this a lot, and you know how I am. It's important to note that teaching swears and curse words is not appropriate in all teaching contexts or for all students, and it should be done with sensitivity and caution. However, I very often throw caution to the wind because I find it to be a valuable addition to language lessons. So, let me tell you why. So, one, I had a fun class with my two guys from the the business world, and they were letting off a little bit of steam, and we talked about other issues, and so there was much more than just us throwing the F-bomb around, okay? I also have taught, now that I don't work there anymore, and the school has officially closed its doors because it was sold to somebody else. I can tell you this story without fear of repercussion. That I worked for a school and I worked mostly with the teenagers, and the teenagers there they were there at the school for years and years. I mean, since they were 7 or 8 years old, and I only got them around 14, 15 years old until they were around 18, graduating and going off to university. Now, when I got these teens, they wanted a profanity class. I think they also saw me as the teacher that wore mostly like all black, had tattoos and a nose piercing, so they maybe thought that I was super rebellious. Good assumption on their part. And I also tried to justify it in my head, not because I thought it would be a fun class, but also because they were going off to exchange programs. And much to their parents' dismay, they were going to be living in a different place for 6 months. And I tried to convince the parents a little bit, those parents that knew that it was going to be a good thing for their son or daughter to know how to swear in English. And I do stand by this. I joke about this, but I actually really do genuinely feel like English language students need to learn how to swear. Why? Because they need to know which situations they're in, assess the scenario, and they need to know if they want to stay or if they need to leave. And I think language can very much help you identify if a situation is getting a little hairy and you want to, exit stage right. So these particular students as well were off and going and trying to do exchange programs. Now they're going to be around, they were going to, some were going to France, some were going to the US, and some were going to Canada. Now, I can't speak to Canada or France, but I can tell you about the US. And myself, I learned to swear like a sailor, mostly from my colleagues at high school. So, it's just kind of the competition of who can say the most offensive thing. Maybe I grew up in a different generation, but I think this still happens. So teenagers swear a lot, they curse, and here's the thing. English language students, especially ones that don't live in English-speaking countries, are at a disadvantage because the only thing that they get to hear is usually through pop culture like music and series and movies and stuff like that. And some of those things are not contextualized. And some of those things also glorify the usage of bad language to the point where some students might think it's okay to use a word or a phrase because it's been glorified in that scenario. But if you use it in reality, it's going to cause a lot of problems. An example of that is one of my students misused the N-word. That is a racial slur, not a swear, not the things that I teach, but racial slurs are things that come up, and I said, oh my God, please don't say that again. First, please don't say that again. Second, where did you hear it? And he heard it in music because he likes to listen to rap and hip hop and things like that. And so I had to kind of explain to him the implications of that and why he shouldn't be saying it and how it could be impactful and hurtful, and especially if he starts traveling around. And he assumed that maybe it was something that she could use to refer to another person. It's not, and it's not okay. So again, just supporting my decision to teach swearing. So I've got just a couple justifications. And I don't know if I'm just trying to justify it because I enjoy cursing occasionally. Or there is a linguistic necessity for these types of classes. But here you go, if you need to justify. So one, there is an aspect of understanding cultural nuances. So swear and curse words are often, I wrote this down so just so I was, because I felt I had to be a little bit careful about what I was saying here. But so swear and curse words are often deeply embedded in cultural context of a language. And by teaching these words, students can gain a deeper understanding of the culture and society where the language is spoken. This is true. I mean, there's a lot of there's a lot of cultural aspects embedded in swearing and what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. You can kind of understand how the nuances impact those relationships. So, okay. Authenticity in language. So swear and curse words are a part of everyday language, whether you like it or not. And avoiding them in class can make it difficult for students to understand how to communicate in real life situations. I'm not saying that everyone swears like I do. Much to my mother's dismay, I tend to swear a lot. I tone it down for professional purposes, but I like a good swear. I think it's just sentence enhancers for me. That's what they are. I like to swear. I have colorful language. I don't apologize for it, but I certainly know how to regulate it, which I think is important for students to know as well. And not that they're going to be engaging in using swear and curse words constantly throughout conversations. And we should put this into every single, no, but they need to know that this does exist and how to deal with that. So, because they will hear it and we don't want them to be shocked or to use things inappropriately. So we can also teach appropriate usage. While swearing and cursing can be considered impolite or offensive in some situations, in most situations, there are also situations where students are considered, where swearing is considered appropriate or even necessary. Sometimes I feel like it's necessary to really get your point across, but again, it depends and they have to kind of judge the scenario. So by teaching students when and how to use these words appropriately, we can help them kind of navigate these complex social situations. Also, addressing the language taboo. So by acknowledging the existence of swear words and curse words and discussing them in class, we can help break down taboos around the words and often promote more open and honest communication. Again, I think they need to know. They don't necessarily need to use, but they need to be aware. So we can encourage critical thinking. Now, some of these I'm stretching a little bit, but I need to justify that swearing is, it's something we should bring up. So encouraging critical thinking by exploring the use of swear and curse words, we can encourage students to think critically about the power of language and how it can be used to express emotions and exert influence. This one, I put this one here because of the class that I recently had a couple of weeks ago. Building rapport with students. By showing that we're willing to tackle controversial or sensitive topics, we can build rapport with our students and create a more engaging and dynamic learning environment. Listen, I'm not opposed to talking about things that make people uncomfortable. I actually don't care. There's very little that actually makes me blush. I blush a lot because I have rosacea and my skin complexion it doesn't help me. Any emotion you're gonna see, I get a little flustered, but there's not a lot of things that I won't have a conversation about, and I think it's actually quite good in terms that my students are never afraid to ask me about something because they know that I just don't care about it. Like I don't put a lot of weight into things. If they have a question, they're curious about it. Regardless of how taboo and weird it might be, I'm like, okay, certainly let's take a look. My Google search history is colorful. And I think if anybody had to look through it, and it would be horrifying, but that's fine. Yeah, it is what it is. So I don't mind talking about these types of things. I'm not saying all teachers need to talk about these types of things. If you're comfortable doing it, I think it's good. If you're not comfortable doing it, okay, that's fine. Then also, that you're not that type of teacher, which is okay. And I think it does prepare students for real life language. So swearing, cursing, it's a part of real life language. If we expose the students to this type of language, we can better prepare them for the challenges of communicating in the real world. And this was very reflective of what I saw with my teenagers who were going off. I mean, the exchange programs, they're going off with high school and university level students. So the fact that they're going to be probably making friends, hopefully they're going to be making friends. Who knows what type of friends they're going to be making, but hopefully decent friends. But even the most decent of kids that I know have occasionally thrown out, a little bad word here and there. And yeah, I mean, especially if they're university, possibly if they're, if they're in France and they're high school level, and if they're in the US and Canada and they're university level, there's house parties and frat parties and all of that type of stuff. There's drinking, there's sex, drugs, and rock and roll. That stuff happens. I mean, it's a part of life. So if kids are going to have these experiences, I think this was instilled to me by my mother. Hopefully she doesn't mind that I'm telling the world this. I'm putting it online. No, but she always said to us that, at least she said to me when I was growing up, she said, listen, I don't want you to do these things, but I also was a teenager at some point in her life. She was a teenager. So she said, if you end up somewhere and you're stuck or you're drunk or anything like that, I would much rather you call me and I'm going to come get you and you're going to come home safe than you try to finagle a bagel and get into an accident or have so my parents they never promoted bad behavior, but they also understood that the reality of the world was I was going to be exposed to it. And if I could make a responsible, mature decision about how to handle it, they felt much better. Of course, I made mistakes. I was a kid. I didn't have prefrontal cortex was not fully developed, and I made mistakes. Of course I did. But I never made anything that was so egregious that it turned into a really big problem. And so I think that's kind of what I take from my parents, is that if I'm dealing with students and I'm trying to give them the best linguistic tools possible to manage in situations, they also need to be able to identify situations that could be potentially dangerous for them, potentially uncomfortable, things that they don't want to participate in, to be able to identify those and be able to manage and make a mature and responsible decision linguistically on how to deal with that and whether they want to engage because they happen to feel comfortable engaging, or whether they recognize something and say, this is not something that I want to engage in, and so I'm going to walk away. So yeah, this is why I think teaching swears is kind of important. I say, fuck it, throw caution into the wind, see what happens, and hopefully they'll be better able and better equipped, linguistically speaking, to make those decisions on whether they want to participate or not in that scenario that they've gotten themselves into. So that's it for this episode. It's quick and dirty today. We don't want to linger too much on the swear words, because I'm sure that there's going to be lots of people that have strong opinions about this, and that's fine. I'm not promoting it. I'm not saying that any language teachers need to include this in their curriculum. What I'm saying is these are my justifications of why I think sometimes, and I want to put that, clarify that, sometimes it's necessary for our students to have knowledge of these things for them to interact appropriately. That's it for me today. Hopefully you'll come back for another episode, and I will see you soon. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Real Talk in ELT. Want to join the conversation? Head on over to Instagram at Kelly Pettington ELT and send me a message. Be sure to subscribe to my YouTube or Spotify channel to stay up to date, and of course, take care of yourself, your health, your vibe, and your tribe. Until next time.